Welcome to the Links to Messiah podcast, anchoring our New Testament faith in Old Testament traditions. And now, your host, Rachel Kushner.
So this is my friend Janel. Janel is a Jewish believer in Jesus, and she is a faithful servant of God. She is a friend, and we had the pleasure of raising our children together. I can recall our kids riding bikes, playing on playgrounds, taking trips, and making Hanukkah menorahs together with our kids out of paint stirrers and bolts. You just mailed me that photograph, and I love seeing our kids engaged in that activity. I treasure it. So thank you, Janel, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. So let's just dig right on in. So let me ask you this. I mean, obviously, this is just a conversation. I know we have some formal questions, but we'll keep it conversational. But as a believer in Jesus, I want to know from you why you think it's important and what is the value of teaching our kids the Old Testament.
Well, certainly to show our kids the continuity of our family heritage with our Christian faith that we're walking out day to day. And for us, in a typical Christian church, Christian life in America doesn't always reflect the Jewish roots of our faith. So with a very Jewish last name, people sometimes are confused that we're even in a church, for starters. So we wanted our kids to have the rich heritage to be able to answer that question and to just see that Jesus was Jewish and God kept his promises to the Jewish people by sending a Messiah. So we just see the continuity of the story and wanted to convey that to our kids.
Of course, absolutely. It makes perfect sense. One of the things, too, that I personally like about teaching the Old Testament is it's very rich in moral and spiritual teachings. I know that's nothing new to you, but I think that kids can learn those valuable lessons from characters from both positive and negative things that happen. Stories like Joseph's integrity and Moses's leadership and David's repentance and all of those kinds of things just provide these important lessons in character and in faith.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
In fact, our daughter Ruth loved the story of Esther and wanted to have that in her nursery school lessons. But the poor teacher didn't have that in her curriculum, so she couldn't grasp why that would be important to a preschooler. I was baffled. Our kids pick their favorite Bible stories. Our son loved the story in Judges of Ehud because he was left-handed and our son was left-handed. So many nights he would want that Bible story at bedtime, which people forget is even in the Old Testament. But things like that are just fun to share with your kids that are a little bit deeper maybe or out of the ordinary Bible stories.
Yes, I love that. So Aaron liked that story because Ehud was left-handed. Ehud?
Okay. Probably E-H-U-D, so you're probably saying it more properly.
I'm not sure. And Ruth wanted her preschool teacher to teach her about the book of Esther. That's incredible. So let me ask you about some memories that you might be able to share. Do you have like personal experiences or stories when you were teaching your kids about the Old Testament? You shared some already, but thinking about the Jewish feasts and how has that brought you closer as a family?
The big obvious one is to have a Passover Seder as a family, which we were able to do for many years, still do. In fact, with another family, they approached us and said, will you share with us your heritage of the Passover Seder? So they really got us interested to properly celebrate, if you will. And we had 3 generations of our family and their family celebrate annually still, come together and have a full Seder so that when their kids and our kids are in church and celebrating communion, they know it's part of a bigger picture. It's not just a cracker and a cup of juice. They know that this is the culmination of a Passover Seder and it has deep, deep meaning and great symbolism. So you talked about our Jewish traditions having great moral lessons. I think it's got great object lessons too, the things you can touch and smell and feel and eat. It just means so much more than just this snack you have at church once in a while. No disrespect intended to what we do today. We need to remember, the Lord told us to remember and have the Lord's Supper that way. But knowing that it comes from something else is a great treasure.
Absolutely. It just makes everything feel deeper, richer, like you said, connected to that heritage and understanding the why. Why are we having this cracker, this piece of matzah and juice? What is that all about?
And to share that with my in-laws who were not believers in Jesus, but had their own experiences growing up with the Seder, for us to say, oh, this is what Jesus did with his disciples, just plants those seeds with them also, and seeing, oh, we do this in church, but only a part of it, trying to draw them into our current worship experience was, an extension of that celebration in the home.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, that's one of the things that I love about all the Jewish holidays is that they are intergenerational. We're sitting around a table, we're having a meal, we have babies, we have aunties, we have cousins, we have grandma and grandpa, and I love it. It's so fun. Well, let's jump ahead a little bit. We know in the fall we have the high holidays coming up. We have Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year, and then 10 days later we have Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. And then we have Sukkot, which is what I want to talk with you about today. So I guess before we jump into that, let's just make sure anybody listening understands what Sukkot's all about, that it's a very joyous festival in the Jewish calendar, and we celebrate the abundant harvest that has been provided by the Lord, that we've gathered, and we know it's called the Feast of Tabernacles. It's a 7-day celebration commemorating God's protection and providing for the Israelites as we were moving through slavery in Egypt. And during Sukkot, as you know, Jewish families, we build a sukkah, which is a temporary shelter or a hut. And so for 7 days, we treat that sukkah like a home away from home. It's a dwelling place. And we can read about it, Leviticus 23, John 7, Jesus celebrates the Feast of Tabernacles. But in modern times, I've been learning more about this holiday as well. Jewish people really look at Sukkot as a chance to get outside, to live more simply, and to just really free themselves of material possessions. So there's this focus and appreciation of what's most important in life. So did you celebrate Sukkot growing up or with your kids?
Interesting. Growing up, I did not, but my first exposure, oddly enough, the street I grew up on had a temple at the end of it, and across the street from that temple was a Baptist church. So we'd see people going to temple, and my first exposure was seeing a sukkah down in the parking lot and asking my parents, what is that? Why are they doing that? So that, I saw that. It was a curiosity. And then as our kids were growing up, we had a neighbor, couple doors down. This couple were Jewish believers in Jesus, and they put a sukkah in their patio. So they invited us over, come in, help us decorate, have a meal with us. And that was a joy to be able to celebrate with them. We've often talked about building a sukkah, but we never did because we're not too handy construction-wise. But there is just go outside and eat your dinner and remember, or one last chance to go camping, those kinds of things at that time of year. Or Sukkot was put into the Jewish calendar when the Jewish people were in an agricultural society, and we're far removed from that now. But the idea of harvest, we just don't think about that, but it was an ingathering of the last chance, take all the, last chance to bring all the goods in and celebrate that God had given us a good year. That kind of thing.
And isn't there something just so beautiful and amazing about being outside and being under a sukkah and eating and being with your family? It is a really very special, I've experienced it and I've loved it. It's just been very meaningful for me. So let's jump in. Let's dive even a little deeper and talk about these sukkah booths, these temporary dwellings. So how would you incorporate that theme into your teachings or even into your thinkings about Jesus's earthly life and his ministry?
Good question. And the whole idea that God did give Moses a tabernacle and a pattern of where he wanted to dwell for the Israelites as they were traveling through the wilderness. And then when that was no longer being used and Solomon built a physical temple, kind of solidified that temporary dwelling and made it permanent, but that even didn't last. So God sent Jesus, a being to dwell with us, to dwell within us. We're almost a temporary dwelling for the Holy Spirit, now. All that pattern kind of repeats. The Lord wants a place to show his glory. He wants to indwell us. He wanted to indwell with the whole nation of Israel, and there was failure, there was sin, he had to start again. And he sent Jesus as the new covenant. And when Jesus died on the cross, the temple veil was torn. Like there's no more boundaries, no more veil. We can see him face to face. We don't have to stand behind the tent if it was, as if it were. So we can see him. I see a lot of those similarities that what you were thinking of.
Yeah, I think that's such a great explanation of that little bit of history that is so important about, God leading the Israelites through the desert. And I think about how he was that pillar of fire at night. The other thing too, like you were saying, that this is our temporary, like our bodies are temporary. We're just sort of passing through. And I think of that verse from John about the word becoming flesh, dwelling among us. I've been thinking a lot about that word dwelling and what does that word mean? I looked it up to try to understand it. And what I learned was it means to be and to live. Dwell means to be and to live. So to abide, to sit, to remain.
Mm-hmm. One interesting thing I found about Jesus celebrating Sukkot was, figure out where I am, in John 7, that he talks about living water being poured out. We have the ingathering of the harvest, but there was also this 8-day celebration of water being poured out. And this is the celebration of, we've got something to drink, I guess. Again, I'm removed from agricultural life, so I don't really know. But Jesus goes up in the feast around about verse 37, on the last and greatest day of the feast, which would have been day 8. Jesus stood and said in a loud voice, "If anyone's thirsty, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scriptures said, streams of living water will flow from within him."
One of the things that I've been learning about, as you're talking about that, is that on that last day, the priest would take a container of water and pour it on the altar as a symbol of hope for the coming rain. About that, with the water, and Jesus saying the significance of him saying, "If anyone is thirsty, let him come and drink." That's satisfying our most deep need that we have.
All these symbols are just beautiful reminders of our need for him, but how he does provide, like you said.
Absolutely. So thinking about Sukkot and understanding its historical context, cultural significance, how do you think that enhances a family's understanding of Jesus's mission and his message? And we've talked about that already, but is there anything else that you can think of?
Yeah, just if you're following along in the Jewish calendar, along with the school year, or you're supplementing with, I don't know, maybe somebody's teaching a Sunday school lesson for kids, you can follow that pattern in scripture and on the calendar routinely. And just each year it builds more memory for the kids. They can anticipate those things and learn a little bit more each year. And, I remember this from last year, and they can start telling the story too as they grow. We homeschooled our kids varying, years, some of them all the way, well, one of them all the way, and the other two ended up in school by the end. But when our oldest was in high school, we developed a half-year Jewish traditions kind of class for her to have a half credit of religion or Bible, but it was all on the Jewish traditions, and that she got to dive into on her own of what is Rosh Hashanah, what is Yom Kippur, what is Sukkot, what is Hanukkah for, why are all these things pointing to Jesus? And she found that very useful, helpful.
I know she has.
Good.
Yes. Well, for those of you listening, I will tell you a little behind the scenes of Links to Messiah, that Janel's daughter, Ruth, who is the same age as my daughter, Sarah, has done so much behind the scenes work with Links to Messiah. And she's so gifted. She says, well, here's what I'm really good at. I'm good at making words look pretty. So
Oh,
she does all of the inserts and
she
designs
enjoys it.
them. They are beautiful. And people tell me they hang on to those and they refer to them. They are well read.
That's
So
great. She enjoys her work with you.
yeah, you guys planted that seed in her, as a child. And here she is as a young adult woman, still doing all those wonderful traditions. Okay, so let me just wrap up with a final question. I know we've touched on this, but is there anything else that you would want to add about embracing those Old Testament traditions and how that might enrich a family's understanding of Jesus and just strengthen a personal faith in Jesus the Messiah?
Well, for our family, we were, I guess, in the minority in our mainline church. So the fact that we were Jewish believers in Jesus was not commonly known in our congregation, which was probably 800, 1,000 people. So our church didn't recognize a lot of the Jewish traditions. It was something we practiced and talked about at home, but our kids could share that with other kids, and both unbelieving Jews in the neighborhood or their kids and friends in Sunday school. Like, our kids would play in the yard and they say, yes, Jesus is the Jewish Messiah. It's fine to believe in Jesus and be Jewish, because we did. They were totally confident in this. We, as a family, thank God they were secure enough to speak up like that. Or even in Sunday school, they knew a lot more answers and could go a little bit deeper than some of the other kids, because of what we talked about at home and the idea that we had this rich history. Our grandparents brought this and way back to Moses, and this is our people. I guess it just more of a connection to what we were actually reading.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you say, it just makes it sort of come alive in a new and rich way. And I think I just love the idea of your kids outside just saying, yes, Jesus is the Jewish Messiah, because that's what they grew up learning and knowing in practical ways, and then in celebrating holidays, everything. That's wonderful.
What they read, so they believed it.
That's right. God was working in their hearts when they were little. Well, thank you, Janel. Appreciate your time and appreciate your friendship. And just, you've been a great friend to me over the years. Makes me choke up, but we'll end it there. Thank you.
Thank you.